BookTube, it's Kim at Middle of the Bookmarch, and you guessed it, this is my video for the best books of 2023. The best books, that means the 5-star books out of the group of books that I loved during this past year. These are the best of the best. And just like I did in my best 4-star books of the year, I have the same category. So we're doing a best in show format. And at the end of the list, I will tell you which of these choices I thought is my best in show. So let's get down to it. These are the best, so these are all 5 stars. The best nonfiction of the year is Unbroken by Laura Hillenbrand. Laura Hillenbrand is a spectacular writer. She also wrote Seabiscuit, which is one of my favorite nonfictions of all time. Both of her books have nothing to do with anything that I would typically be interested in. Go figure. But because I love Seabiscuit so much, I wanted to read whatever she wrote, and I picked up Unbroken. Now, I listened to the majority of it on audio, and it was narrated by Edward Herman, who was the dad in Gilmore Girls. And he's got a very distinctive voice. He was perfect narrating this book. And the good part about the physical copy is there are pictures in here. Let me see if I can find one. There's a picture. That is Louis Zamperini, and he is the main focus of the book. This takes place prior to, during, and after World War II. And Louis Zamperini was a childhood miscreant, a hooligan. He was very mischievous, got into a lot of trouble until he discovered track in school. He became a track star and a champion runner. Until he joined the military, until he joined the Air Force right during or the very beginning of World War II. So he ended up on military planes. He was eventually sent to Japan and was in a plane that was shot down over the Sea of Japan. And at one point, he was considered lost or killed in action. That's not even a spoiler. It's just part of the description of this book. This is so well written and so well researched, so comprehensive and complete. I was so impressed by this book, and the way that Hillenbrand just serves you Zamperini's life and the way she writes it, the way she documents the events that happened to him and the events that happened in world history is just phenomenal. I love Hillenbrand's writing, and I wish she had another book. She's got 2, both nonfiction, narrative nonfiction. I need to read another one of her books. It's just phenomenal. Read it, read it, read it. The next category is Best Mystery of the Year. This was, whether it may have been the very first book I read of the year or right after it, but it is These Silent Woods by Kimmy Cunningham Grant, and I listened to this one on audio. Again, such a phenomenal audio, narrated by Bronson Pinchot, who, I forget the name of the show that he was in way back in the day. I'll put it here at the bottom of the screen. But These Silent Woods, oh, it was so good and such a great audio. And I don't get along with fiction on audiobook, but this was so good. This is the story of a veteran and his little daughter who is living in isolation off the grid in the middle of remote woods. And there are reasons, and there is a very big series of events that led to why they're living that way. I'm not even going to say more than that. It is so well written. It is so well paced. It is so interesting. And oh my gosh, it is so good. The ending blew my mind, blew the top of my head off type of an ending. It is so good, and I have recommended this to my book group, and I think a few of them have just absolutely loved it. And those women are very discriminating, so this is a excellent mystery, and go out and search it out. See if you'll listen to it. Bronson Pinchot is an excellent narrator. Okay, the best translated fiction of 2023. Elena Knows by Claudia Pinheiro, translated by Francis Riddle from the Spanish. Yeah, Claudia Pinheiro is from Buenos Aires. This has been all over BookTube, but I loved it. I loved it. It was such a good translated novel. This is the story of Elena, who is dealing with the death of her daughter Rita, and Rita is found hanging from a church. The authorities have decided that she committed suicide, but Elena is convinced that she came to some harm. Somebody murdered her. So she decides to investigate her daughter's death. But Elena has a form of advanced Parkinson's that makes it difficult to impossible to navigate her surroundings. This book takes place in one day, and we follow Elena through the city as she's trying to deal with public transport and deal with looking people up and finding addresses and getting around by herself. And we read flashbacks of their lives and their relationship. It is so good. It was so well written. It was so well translated. I have never read a story like this. That it was unique. I'm not sure what more words to use for great books. It was a great book. I just loved it. It was the best translated novel I read last year. Okay, the best backlist of last year. This is the book that motivated me to start the Blind Eye Book Club, which I've stopped doing. I did it for the year. I'm still wishy-washy on maybe I'll bring it back in some form or another. I'm not sure, so don't hold me to that. It's just in there. But this is the book that motivated me to start the Backlist Book Club, and it's A Fine Balance by Rohinton Mistry. This is set in India in the 70s, and it's kind of a sweeping tale of a family and their relatives and their friends and associates. It deals with abject poverty in India and family relationships, women's issues, feminism, the treatment of women in this type of 70s Indian communities. It is a fantastic book. It is bleak and depressing and sad and filled with hate and love and confusion and some really awful events that happen to people. But it is a masterfully written long story. I loved this book. And this is a favorite of many people. This was an Oprah book years ago, and this was written in, oh gosh, a long time ago, 1995. And it was way back when it first came out. It was an Oprah book in her book club. And I bought it so long ago and never read it. It was always on my shelf. I had to buy a new copy, this reprinted copy, because my old copy just fell apart and I hadn't even read it yet. So I read it in this format. It's a beautifully harrowing, gorgeously written book, and try not to be intimidated by its length because it's immersive. It sucks you in. Okay, the best contemporary novel I read last year. This is, you hate it or you love it. It's Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I loved it, and I hate the cover. It's a shitty cover, and I said this in my last video. Factory Girls was also a shitty cover. I hate this cover, but it's a great book. It's not chick lit. It's not romantic fiction. It's much more serious than that. It's darker. It is deeper. This is the story of Elizabeth Zott, who was a female chemist in the 50s. She deals with sexual harassment, sexual assault, chauvinism, the death of a love. She deals with an unexpected pregnancy. It's all very early in the book. But the themes in here are really timely. She is a chemist who is not allowed to be a chemist, who ends up the star of a cooking show. I loved it. I had so much fun reading this, but I also was very moved by the deeper themes in this book. And I really admire Bonnie Garmisch. This book came out when she's in her 60s, and it was rejected so many times, but she got it published, and it's just a phenomenal bestseller. #1 New York Times bestseller. I walked into the bookstore and I was hovering around the table, and I went to pick up a copy to read the blurb, and 2 women came right up to me and said, "That book is fantastic, you have to buy it." And I did. So I loved it. Lessons in Chemistry. I know there is a miniseries. I believe it's a miniseries. I don't know if it's on Apple TV or one of those streaming channels. I'm not sure. But I loved the book. Don't let the cover fool you. Okay, the best classic of 2023. This is why I read. This is Sophocles 3. I just did this right in front of my face. 3 Theban plays: Antigone, Oedipus the King, and Oedipus at Colonus. This is why I read, people. This was just artistry in print. I of course knew the Oedipus story, or the Oedipus, what's it called? The complex, the Oedipus complex. And I had, offhand knowledge of Antigone and so on and so on. Reading each of these plays was mind-bending for me. There's so much in ancient Greek plays, because so much world literature is written from them, is based off of them, the themes and the topics. Reading this compilation and finally understanding the deeper meanings of the Oedipus complex and the story of Antigone, and just blew me away. This is very easy to understand. So if you're intimidated by the ancient classics and you're intimidated by Greek dramas and tragedies, it was worth every second of my time. I can't gush enough about this. This is a book I will hold on forever. I will probably go back and read these plays. I can't say enough about it. If you have any interest at all in the ancient literature, please pick that up. I did the same topic in my last list, the best book on mental health, because I hosted Mental Health May with Marilyn Maya Mendoza last May, and I read a bunch of nonfiction and a bunch of fiction. This was a reread for me, and this is a tiny little memoir. It's not even 100 pages. But this is Darkness Visible by William Styron. He is the author of Sophie's Choice. He suffered from major depression and was hospitalized, at one point was suicidal, and it was to the point where it was debilitating. And he chronicles that moment in his life, those moments, those events in his life, in this tiny little memoir. But it is so powerful and so effective, so sad, but also we get a climax and a conclusion to this era in his life. And there's so much to learn from him, and being so transparent about major depression and his experience with it. If you are at all interested in the topics of mental health and depression specifically, you must read this book. It is just almost the book on the pedestal to read on the topic of depression. It's that good. And that's why it's on my list. The best book that I read about the Black American experience is A Raisin in the Sun by Lorraine Hansberry. There was no contest. This is a play, and it's just such a bright example of what drama should be. And it talks about a Black family living in a tiny apartment. I believe this is set in the 60s. She died at 34 years old. And this is a masterpiece. A Raisin in the Sun it's just a dramatic masterpiece. She writes about this family, a large family living in a tiny apartment in the city, who is they got a life insurance policy from the father who died, and they want to use it the best way they possibly can. To them, it wasn't a lot of money, but to them at the time, it felt like they were rich. And they go back and forth with all of the family members what they're going to do with this money. Are they going to get themselves out of the city? Are they going to be able to better their lives? Should it go to one or two of the family members at the expense of giving it to the greater good? It was such a wonderfully written play, and talks about what this Black family was dealing with in so many different ways. It talks about racism, talks about dating relationships, financial security, family, extended family, real estate. There's so much here in this little tiny play. If you're not a fan of drama or reading plays, it was still so good. And I don't read very much of them. I mean, last year I read this one and the Theban plays and was just overjoyed for reading both of them. So yeah, a spectacular book. This is the book that blew me away because of the BookTube Prize. And I read NonFiction last year. Paradise Falls by Keith O'Brien. The true story of an environmental catastrophe. This is about Love Canal in New York and on the border of New York and Niagara Falls in Canada. I kind of knew what Love Canal was about, but I never would have picked this book up had I seen it in the bookstore. Had I walked by this on a table, it wouldn't have even caught my eye. I couldn't believe how good this book was and how much it struck me, how this reading experience was so positive for me. To read what Love Canal was, how it originated, how deadly it was to the small suburban area, little kids at school, the school grounds, the neighborhood, the worthlessness that this land became because of this environmental catastrophe, the politics, and the group of women, housewives and mothers who battled these companies that polluted their land, who battled the politicians. They battled their neighbors for the sake of their health and safety and won. And just reading this, the research, the interviews, the pictures, there are pictures in here that make you see what happened to this land and that show these families, some of the members of these families and how this all affected them. It's a phenomenal book. Again, another nonfiction book of a topic I never would have picked up. I wouldn't have bothered. And if you're a nonfiction reader, typically you gravitate towards your own interests. But this was thrust upon me by the BookTube Prize, and it was awesome, awesome. The last category is the best audiobook of the year. I listened to some phenomenal audiobooks. This one by far was my favorite, the best of the best. And it was the audiobook of Foster by Claire Keegan. The Irish accent, the setting, the narrator. Foster is a novella about this little girl whose mother is pregnant yet again with another child. They have a lot of children in this Irish family. And she is fostered by a relative of her mother because her mother cannot take care of all of these children. So she goes to this couple to be fostered, to stay with them for a few months, and she realizes what a different life could be like. It's so filled with heart and warmth and sadness and hope and such different types of love. It blew me away in a tiny little package. The narrator, I don't even remember who the narrator was. I'll try to put it down here somewhere. It was just unbelievably good. And Claire Keegan, I don't know one thing that she's come out with that is bad. I just don't. But this was my best audio of the year, and it was just so wonderfully done. Okay, now we've gone through the list. Have we? Yes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We are at the best in show. Out of all of the categories, and as I said in my last video, I don't split up fiction and nonfiction because I usually judge the best by my reading experience, along with the quality of the book. My best in show for 2023 is A Fine Balance by Hinton Mystery. This book languished on my shelves for so long. It was intimidating because of its length. It was intimidating because of the subject matter, but this emotionally wrecked me. It blew me away. The beauty of the writing, the topic, the content, the characters, the pacing. It's very difficult to read. There's so many places it's so difficult to read, but I'm not sorry at all. It was a phenomenal reading experience. It was a beautiful book, and it's my best in show for 2023. That is it. Let me know in the comments below if you've read any of these books, what you think. If you have a favorite book of 2023, I would love to know, and I will see you all in the next video. Bye, everybody.